So in today's video, I want to introduce you to my friend Spencer Hu. I met Spencer several years ago when gosh, I don't even know how long ago now, when I was teaching a certified international property specialist class for up in Orange County, California. And Spencer is very active in both the certified international property specialist community as well as international real estate in general. Spencer is an American-born Chinese, and as is, it's not uncommon. I have many friends who did a tremendous amount of business with Chinese nationals coming to the United States to buy homes. And at one point in time, it was relatively easy to transfer the money from into American dollars. That's a simple way to put it. So it would, at one point it was easy to do. Getting the money out of China, transferring it into US dollars was not difficult, and there was a tremendous amount of business being done here in California with that client base, if you will. Well, what ended up happening is that China kind of put the kibosh on that and closed the purse strings and said, no, we're not doing that anymore. And now you're very limited. Spencer's going to speak to it, but you're very limited on how much money can come into the US from China to be transferred into US dollars. And so that piece of business pretty much dried up. And having done what I've done for so many years as a coach and as a manager, um, when a business changes for an agent, whatever the change may be, who knows what happens. But in this case, it was the Chinese money was no longer coming in. Chinese buyers were no longer able to buy in the same way. The business goes away. Some agents that I personally knew just rolled up the carpet and pulled the stone across the cave and went cave dwelling and kind of went off the grid. And that's unfortunate. That's not what happened with Spencer. Spencer's such a smart guy. Instead of rolling up the carpet, he said, okay, what do I do? Now, how do I fix this? What do I do next? And he decided to look into the international component. We live in Southern California. And he started doing research and trying to find out, where do Americans and Canadians buy real estate? And he discovered it was Mexico. By the way, we always have Pepper and Bear in my shows. Very important. So he realized that after his research that American and Canadian buyers are buying a lot of homes in Mexico. So he made a decision to go down there and try to figure this out. And what can I do? How can I become involved? And he worked very hard to develop relationships down there. And since the beginnings has done exactly that. He has relationships with developers. He's doing trade missions down there. And so you're going to hear about all of that stuff. I'm excited about this video because I like outside of the box thinkers, folks that just don't say, this is the norm, I can only do it this way. That's not what it should be. And so some of the questions I asked him were like, how did you do this? And then what happened? And how do you make it happen? And what about financing? All of those questions are being answered. And at the very end of the video, you're going to see a few of the places he's currently working with. He owns one property there. He's going to be closing on two more. So he's actively buying down there himself to be used as short-term rentals. But at the end, you're going to see a couple of the properties that he's actively involved in. His contact information is there. And take a look. And if you or someone you know has interest in investing in Mexico, please reach out to Spencer, because he's the guy that can help you make it happen and relatively seamlessly. So I hope you enjoy the video. I certainly had a great time doing it. I think the world of him. I just love people that don't get stuck in the mud and say, what can I do instead? Or how do I make this better? What do I do next? Love that. So I hope you enjoy meeting my friend Spencer Hu. Wow, my friend Spencer Hu, I'm so excited to be with you today. This is exciting for me. You and I met a bunch of years ago when I was doing CIPS, and we've seen each other over the years. I've been honored to have you be around a lot of the CIPS events, which is just a joy for me. And we haven't been in each other's presence for that too terribly long a time ago, but not often enough. And so I reached out to you because I just think that what you're doing and how it started with you actively working, looking for investors in a lot of countries, but seems to me a lot of Mexico. And I do want to talk about all of that. But talk to me, Spencer, a little bit about that history. Where did it start? What was the trigger that got you going? What made you decide this is what I want to do? And then, kind of share with the group, how did you do that? I mean, what did you do?
Yeah, definitely. So, like you're probably wondering, kind of very strange for someone of Chinese descent concentrating on Mexico. And I
wasn't
joke
going
about
to say that,
myself.
Spencer. So
No, I use it as part of my intro as well, basically, because we're trying to get everyone interested in Mexico. But my start in global, as you probably know, was working with Chinese buyers and investors and relocation clients coming here to the US.
Mhm.
And California, of course, was one of the top countries for that. So that was pretty natural.
Yeah,
And pretty much what happened was that market vaporized
right,
pretty much overnight.
right,
So about 2 years before COVID started, so that would have been 2017-ish, they started cracking down on how they were moving money from China to the US, which there's always been a rule, basically. And what that rule is each individual can only convert, not transfer, convert uh, 50,000 US dollars, basically amount every year.
mm,
So most people, unfortunately, they don't plan ahead. They
right,
see something that triggers saying, okay, I want to buy something now. So they don't have time to plan basically converting that money. And then, of course, if they have that balance to do something, put that over here in the US as an all cash purchase or as a down payment. And
yeah,
unfortunately, because of how our prices are in California, we are probably one of the top priciest markets in the US. That market just went away. So we kind of, in a sense, kind of pulling here, trying to figure out what are we going to do now? Because that was our kind of majority of our business for so many years, and we were doing it well, of course. So luckily, we were able to do that. So we basically said, okay, we want to stay in global still. How do we pivot and still stay in global without relying 100% or however many percent that was on China business?
hmm,
So we basically started doing kind of research and development in a sense. Where were the US and Canadian buyers, so our North American buyers, where were they buying outside of their home countries? And after kind of piecing that together in a sense, we came upon Mexico as kind of that natural answer. The market's already there. They have a lot of product in a sense,
hmm,
very similar product to what we have here in the US. So you can buy land, you can buy detached houses, you can buy commercial, you can buy condos.
hmm,
And unfortunately, you can buy, and I don't believe in timeshares, but that's a huge market there, unfortunately. Um, but yeah, so we decided, okay, that all makes sense. And the legal system and the maturity level of Mexico is where it needs to be, that we have that comfort level.
right, right,
Um, Whereas other parts, they're still kind of what we would call emerging market.
right,
So yes, there are good deals in those markets, but the laws and things that affect property ownership might not be up to par with what us here in the US would
right.
be accustomed to or think of as kind of safe and not risky.
Mm,
So that's kind of how we ended up with Mexico. Mexico, of course, is that number one location that the US buyers are buying outside of the US.
mhm.
We are neighbors, so that's only natural. And it's the number two location that the Canadians are buying outside of Canada.
Yep.
So, so definitely it meets kind of our target criteria for what we wanted to do.
Well, that's so brilliant because, what happens, because, I teach CIPS all the time, but what happens in my brain is you're saying, property title records, recorded records, making sure you have the ability
Hmm.
to really receive clear title. And as you know, in some countries, that's just a hope that you're going
That
to
could
have
vaporize at
something.
some point. Yeah.
Exactly. Do you really own this thing? So, well, that's so, and you're right. I've studied Canada, and Canada is always I have a lot of friends up there, but they snowbird,
Yep.
and Mexico is certainly one of those places. And I think I mentioned my daughter and I went to Tulum, but also to Cancun, and we stayed in an all inclusive. My daughter hated this, but it was so
Mm.
funny. But because she said, "Mom, I feel like I'm on a ship that's not moving," and I said, "Well, it's
Yep.
kind of cool. Everything is here," and I loved it. It was fun. But there were
Mhm.
almost everybody that was there were either Canadian or American. And there's one particular woman I remember chatting with her. She says, "I'm usually here 2 or 3 times a year
Mhm.
consistently, where she is actually traveling there because she gets to hang out. It's right on the beach." One of my
Yep.
favorite things that we do as a kind of side, we did, Rachel and I, is we released sea turtles.
Ah, how
And,
cool.
and it was the coolest thing ever. But I wish you'd gotten to meet my child. She's just a unique personality. And so here she's giving a pep talk to every turtle that she's putting in the ocean. You can do it. You're gonna make it. She's having a pep talk with a turtle.
Yep,
But
that's so cute. Yep.
that's my child. So that's my child. So okay, so that's how it started. Then, but there, you went from and by the way, one of my very dear friends, same as you, almost all of her business was coming from Chinese buyers in the U.S. And if you're a business person, you know how to change, and like, and you do your research, and that's one of the things I've always admired about you, Spencer. You're a smart guy. You actually pay attention. What's changing? Where can I go to still fulfill what I've got going on? So it's brilliant. So we got from the place. Okay, here's what we're going to do. Then what did you do?
So
There's a
for us,
there's a lot because you're actively, and I want to talk about this. Forgive me for interrupting you. I want to talk about this, but you're actively involved in a lot of new construction projects in Mexico, and
mhm,
and you have developed relationships. It sounds almost like it's a second home on some level. So talk about that,
mhm.
please.
Yeah, definitely. So we've always traveled to Mexico since we were children on the West Coast side. So Tijuana, Ensenada, all that. So that's totally different than kind of the markets that we're active in now, which are more kind of resort, higher end beach towns. Our first time to Cancun and Riviera Maya area, this was probably, I want to say 2016. So
Wow,
that's fairly recent.
it
Yeah,
is.
that's
You've
like
done all
five,
of
six.
this just since then. Wow,
Yeah.
wow.
So we kind of built from that.
Wow.
And I'm happy that you mentioned basically that all inclusive, that feeling that you guys had. I make a joke with my wife all the time saying it's basically a cruise ship that's on
Right.
land.
It was. In fact,
And you're
we
pretty
had one
trapped.
meet. It felt like that, and we got, and what was funny is that you had the area where the children were allowed to be, and then for other people, if you didn't want to be around the kids, you go to this pool,
Mhm.
swim to the bar, get your margarita, and just hang out. I'm saying, oh my goodness, glacier.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
But funny story that happened that first time we went was all inclusive. It was kind of it's in Puerto Morelos area, so kind of halfway between Cancun and Playa del Carmen. And we had a taxi incident because we didn't know how that works over there. And unfortunately for that area, that's something called a taxi cartel, a taxi mafia.
Oh
They
no.
basically price fix, unfortunately. So I actually, being a CIPS, I'm sure most CIPS I know do the same thing. When we visit a country outside the US, we try to schedule meetings with developers, with other agents that are either CIPS or IRM, International Realtor members.
Uh-huh.
And I scheduled a meeting with the developer, and I couldn't get out of the hotel, unfortunately. It would have cost $75 each way to go about 15-minute route. So
Ah,
unfortunately, I canceled it because I was not for that. I didn't want to support that system, and the developer understood. We're on good terms. But because of that incident, the second year we went back, we said, okay, we're going to book something closer to the city. So we booked something that was pretty much right outside of Playa del Carmen. They
mhm.
specifically have a shuttle that goes to the city.
That's correct.
So we basically utilize that. It's a 5-minute shuttle, about $3 US, probably $4 now because of exchange rate. But that kind of gave us that comfort level. We're still learning at that stage, of course. So those first two times, basically, we were kind of in tourist mode, but semi-exploration mode. And then every time after that, and that second year, we went multiple times. So that second time we went that year, 2017, we said, okay, we're going to be adventurous. We're going to do an Airbnb. We're going to rent a car.
Good for you. I'm
And
proud of you.
a lot of friends said, you're crazy. Don't rent a car. You're going to get pulled over by the cops, whatever. And all these years, I've only been pulled over by the cops once. It was because the car had a missing license plate, which was not my fault. That's how I got it. I showed them basically the paperwork saying there's only one license plate. They let me off. Said, get that fixed because you're going to get pulled over still. But I've never had a corrupt
No.
policeman incident. Everyone that I've known says, don't do it because you're going to get pulled over. I
No.
haven't had it.
I travel, as you know, I travel all over the world, and I always rent cars no matter where I'm going. And when Rachel and I were going,
Mhm,
we landed in Cancun, drove to Tulum, drove back to Cancun,
yep.
and then got rid of the car. We had no problem at all. The only problem I had was because we got there later in the day, and
Mhm,
they don't have those really cool lines in the middle of the road there.
yep.
So you
And
kind of don't know.
sometimes no street lights either, so you're kind of floating around.
Yeah, and it's a that, and I'm from New York, and that scared me. So, but yeah, we made it. In fact, I think I got a little Fiat convertible, and we just had a blast and no problems whatsoever. So yeah,
But I mentioned that story because a lot of what we're doing now is fixing misinformation or fixing fake news, which a lot of people unfortunately don't know that you can't buy in Mexico,
yes,
or they think it's a lease,
right,
which some places it might have been, but right now no.
right,
Or they basically, like we were mentioning earlier, think you'll lose your title at some point,
right,
which all of these there's things in place that basically protect your property ownership, protect you as a foreigner. Everything is how it should be, as close as you can as basically a Mexican citizen.
right,
Yes, there's small loopholes you have to go through, which are particularities with how a foreigner needs to own by the beach or by a border, but we can own and we have basically as much protection as we need. We can sell it at some point. We can lease it. We can, if it's a detached house, you can tear it down. If there's no mortgage, you can build something new. So you have all the protections still.
right.
But anyways, yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to mention a friend of mine. I've known her for years. She was in the catering business, and back when I was still in brokerage management, she
Mhm,
was my go-to person to do events. I don't remember how I found her, but she and I became close. And she
mhm,
said, she looked at me one day. She said, Ginny, I don't make a whole lot of money, but I live right on the beach in Baja California. She bought the land south of Las Gaviotas, Rosarito, Las Gaviotas, south of there, not far. And she built this house of her own. She said, so I don't make a whole lot of money, but I
yep,
wake up next to the ocean every single morning, and she owns it and she's safe. And this is now decades, frankly.
mhm,
I
yep.
want
And
to say I've her
she
20 years.
bought early, so she's lucky.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Oh, I agree. Now she couldn't do the same thing today, but yeah, yeah. In fact, I was down in Gaviotas with my daughter, and she said, you're here." I said, "I can't because I don't have a car. I can't come see you, but I'm going to make that happen because I want to see this house she built from scratch." So yeah,
Mhm,
on the beach, right?
yep. Beautiful. Yep. But yeah, anyways, back to the story. So from that, basically, each subsequent trip we took, we basically started kind of again back into research and development mode, meeting with developers, meeting with the local professionals, which in Mexico you have two very important ones. One's called basically a closing company, so similar to escrow, which is unfortunately optional. So you can actually purchase something without them. And that's one of the thousand stupid ways to do something, but people do it all the time, unfortunately. And you'll have issues at some point, I think. The other one basically called a notario, which in
Yes.
English is a notary, but do not compare notario in Latin America, which not just Mexico, a lot of Latin American countries, some similar system.
Yep.
Do not compare a notario to a notary.
Right.
Notario in Latin America is basically an appointed individual, sometimes by the state, sometimes at the federal level. And we can kind of compare it to a super attorney in a sense. So they're usually real estate attorneys by trade. At some point, they got very good at what they did. The government basically noticed and gave them that post. Doesn't mean that they're going to be the individual overseeing your file, but they have basically staff under them that's trained by them. And because that post is very hard to get, they're not going to risk doing anything stupid. So
I love
they're
that.
the ones that, yeah.
You know the same thing. It's the same thing in Europe. That
Oh,
most of the countries over there also use notorios, and I talk
oh,
about this in CIPS. It's not like we have a
mhm,
notary public here. They're very important jobs, more like a lawyer or an attorney
mhm,
than anything that you would imagine. A notary doesn't do
yeah,
any of that kind of stuff here. So go ahead, keep going because this is
yeah.
fascinating. Keep going.
Yep. So the notario basically what they do is similar to what the title company does here in the US. They're the ones that do the final transfer from the seller or developer to you as a buyer.
Mm,
So that's very important stage. Depending if there's a closing company involved, again, very highly recommend unless you basically know what you're doing down there already. And even for someone like us that knows what we're doing, we always have a closing company on our own personal purchases as well. We have two mid-process right now that will close in August. So property number 2, property number 3.
good for you.
And those actually are across the street from the beach. So it's the closest you can get to the beach in Tulum.
Yeah.
So And then basically we were meeting with the local agents there as well. So very similar circles that me and you are part of. FIAPSI, they have FIAPSI in Mexico. They have AMPI, which is the equivalent of NAR.
Right.
And then basically from those two, basically we kind of started building a small network over there. Some of them were more open to work with us. Some of them took a while for them to warm up to us. But for most of that area, and I think very similar to Asia as well, a lot of the sales for the foreigner crowd is going to be brand new construction. So not a lot of resale, unless you're in specific markets that kind of are already 100% built up and don't really have that land capacity. But and we don't concentrate too much on Cancun. So Cancun would probably be one of those locations that would be resale, right, since they don't have too much land. But where we concentrate in Playa del Carmen and Tulum and everywhere in between, most of the products that we represent basically are going to be brand new construction or recently finished, but basically the buyers basically have the original master brokers selling them.
I see.
And I do want to mention, we are not licensed in Mexico, so we need to stay in our lane.
Good job.
And we only work with developers and master brokers. So those are kind of who are doing the actual transaction. We are not able to do our transactions ourselves again because we're not licensed. We don't want to touch that. Right. At some point maybe, but not at this point. Right. Definitely, we always want to stay in our lane. And I know, with CIPS, and I'm sure you've had many students misunderstand what it is. It's not a license. It's basically knowledge so you can do what we're doing, basically. Do that research and development and build your relationships and make it work how it should be working.
There was one student in my Orange County class that actually thought the CIPS gave her the license to sell. I want to say she wanted to go in Central America somewhere. And I said, no, it's not a license. It's education. And and I can only do what I can do, Spencer, as you know.
But so that's kind of how we got started. We basically every trip we go back, whether we're taking a group now or whether it's kind of just us, we're always basically continuing this. So we're looking at new projects, meeting with new people. With the developer crowd down there, if they've been doing it a while, everyone knows each other. So if it's a project that doesn't really fit, you say, I'm looking for this, and they'll actually refer you to their competition. So that's better builders, of course, not all of them, but the better ones that basically are there for longevity.
Right. Well, this is so cool because it really is an expanding market and it's an opportunity. And, my daughter's a massive fan. She's down there a lot. In fact, she was just down in Oaxaca area at Puerto Escondido for her honeymoon. And then she also they got engaged in Zihuatanejo. So Zihuatanejo, whatever.
Zihuatanejo, yep.
Yeah,
Shawshank Redemption.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And they had this exquisite
one of the new upcoming areas. Yep.
That's another area that is, and Oaxaca is probably their favorite place. They love Oaxaca. They're down there quite often. So, it's just an opportunity, as you say. So let's talk a little bit about what you have happening now. And I know that you just said this, you stay in your lane. You're not licensed. You have relationships. You are the lead and you bring people down. Are you interested in investing? But what you're doing that I really love so much is that because you've already done all of this homework, you're kind of the protection, if you will, the foundational piece to I know, Spencer, who knows that the folks that I'm working with, it's safe for you to be able to do this, to be an investor. Is that a fair statement?
Yep.
And so
that was something we wanted to make sure is that we did it first ourselves. Right. So we can kind of say, okay, we've done it. So you can trust that it is something that works. But also because we wanted to see that process as well. And maybe a double-edged sword because our first purchase went very, very, very smoothly. They actually had everything in line. They had what's called a condo regime pretty much done before closing. So when we closed, they just needed to basically send our actual physical deed package, which is very, very thick, by the way. It's like a book. Wow. But but that's also part of protection because everything is so detailed. Everything is basically backed by a QR code with a hex key that ties to something in a digital system. So nothing can be changed. It's like what they're saying, a smart contract with blockchain. Nothing can be changed.
Right.
So it's very, very something similar to that, I think. But our deed package basically got sent to the government authorities, the registration office. So kind of like our county registrars here in the US. And it came back within a month. It was very quick.
Wow.
The normal process, unfortunately, is very similar to kind of what same thing as Asia, because we own property in China as well. Not in our direct names. It's a partnership with our relatives, because you're not able to own in China as a foreigner, unfortunately. But that's a different process. But anyways, a normal purchase in Mexico, they're not going to have that condo regime done until probably after you take possession, unfortunately. Everything is going to be on the up and up, meaning you're going to sign with the notario saying you took possession. You're going to basically have receipts that you paid whatever the amounts are to the developer. And at some point, hopefully within a couple months, they'll have that complete, because that's on their plan, of course, because they want to get rid of everything and clear it. And then you can basically record your physical deed. But one of my contacts, they're an agent, so they didn't go through our team, of course. I wish they did, because we would have been able to fix it. They basically purchased in a project, and they're still waiting for that condo regime. And they're saying that some of their neighbors that have already moved in for over 2 years, so the first phase of the project, still don't have a recorded deed back. So definitely, and these are big companies, so they're not trying to scam, of course, but the fact that you purchased something, you paid for it, you don't have an actual deed yet, it's kind of scary, I think.
That's very scary. Very scary.
Yeah.
But it can be resolved. So, but you said your first one went very smoothly. What about your second and the third? You're getting ready to close those?
Yep. So right now we're working on the second and third. They're building very quick, so they're not going to miss that timeline. That's the other thing that sometimes happens, is the developers, unfortunately, might miss the timeline by X amount of months. There's a grace period of usually about a month. And then if it's done correctly, again, people that we work with, we have the builders add in a clause saying every month that it's delayed, there's X amount penalty.
Right.
So,
well,
and some developers, they have that by default, and the one we're working with now, they have that by default. So they basically, every single contract that they have, and this is a 270 unit for the first phase, with 2 deliveries. So the first delivery is going to be in August for half of it, 2 buildings. And then the second half is going to be in December, the other 2 buildings. But they're not going to miss that deadline, because every single contract has a penalty. They're not going to want to pay that.
Right. And are these all in?
This builder.
Is it all in Tulum, Spencer?
Yes. So we have chosen Tulum strategically, and mainly because we're purchasing properties mainly for investment reasons. Tulum right now is still somewhat of an emerging, but they basically have a lot of presence already. Tulum, if you went 20 years ago, there was nothing. Tulum basically started, I think, 2005-ish as an actual city. Before that, it was a fishing town, and kind of the people that knew where it was kind of a secret spot. So it's kind of lost some of that appeal, but it's grown in other appeals. So anyways, with Tulum, there's so much people traveling there. It's kind of, in a sense, a higher end luxury location. But at the same time, if you don't want to be spending that luxury amount, there's actual local citizens that live there. So there's local stores as well that do not cater to that luxury crowd. You don't have to be on the beach every day, basically eating high-end 5-star restaurants and drinking $20 cocktails and whatever. Yes, it's fine once in a while, but that's not an everyday
all the time, no.
But for the people that are traveling there for vacation, they do that. And they're willing to spend a little bit more as far as lodging. So if you can find lodging that's in a more central location, and unfortunately for Tulum, you cannot own directly on the beach. That's protected. It's what's called an ejido system. So it's government protected land. And yes, again, if you can do 1,000 things stupidly, meaning you can go buy it, the notary will close it for you. There'll be an exemption in there saying that it's in the ejido, and in 10 years and 50 years and 100 years, whatever it is, you'll lose it.
That's correct.
And I tell my people all the time, if you can find a good deal and you can figure out and use it like a land lease,
Yes.
but if you're looking for something you can keep perpetually, that's not it.
That's not it. Yeah,
but anyways, the people that travel to Tulum, the demographic, and that's very important. You need to know your demographic of travelers because that's your client base. They are usually going to be a younger crowd, the kind of that I want to say digital nomad, which has been widely used. And actually, because of COVID and Mexico being open pretty much a week after everyone went into shutdown mode, Mexico actually had very high peak months as far as sales for studios and one bedrooms because people are going, I can work remotely, I can work by the beach, and I can buy this right now. Right. So very interesting. Yeah.
So talk to me about price points and this, there's another question. Are you planning to Airbnb the places that you're buying? Is that what the plan is for you? Okay. So they're Airbnb, you're going to Airbnb them, which of course, as you know, when you're Airbnb, you have to have feet on the ground people to take care of all that other stuff. But I gotta believe the infrastructure is there. And what are the price points? What kind of numbers are you talking about for like a one bedroom place?
Yep. So right now, and this would be kind of similar for Playa del Carmen and Tulum, which are the two main cities within the Riviera Maya area. A one bedroom will probably be about 100 to 150,000 condo. That will be anywhere from about maybe 400 to 600 square feet. So it could be a pretty large one bedroom actually. Keep in mind that the property sizes that you see, they do include the terrace. So it's not AC covered square footage, it's construction square footage. But I mentioned that because I know from friends that live in New York, they have 400 square foot places that squeeze two bedrooms into it.
You're preaching to the choir, baby. That's my thing. I get it. Totally get it. That's why I chose ultimately to get out of the city and move to Brooklyn to get some space and have a place, and take
with studios, we actually have products that are kind of a little bit less than 100,000. So probably starting around 80,000, 80, 90,000 range. If you don't need to be right smack in the center of Playa del Carmen, we have something that's about a 7-minute drive to the center of Playa del Carmen, meaning it'd be about 4 or 5 minutes to the border of the downtown. And that's 60,000, 65,000 for a two bedroom, smaller two bedroom. So it's going to be about that 600, 700 square foot range. And it's going to be a little bit higher density. But for someone that's looking for a second home,
Yes.
or for someone that be looking to retire there, that's perfect. And they're basically at some point, they are building a mini city there. It's going to take a while, but they are building kind of a mini city. So at some point, it's going to have its own amenities as far as kind of its own shopping. Costco's in talks. So if Costco happens, that's not going to be very valuable.
That's right.
It's about a 5-minute drive to the nearest beach access, which is not a popular beach, but it is a beach access. So around 65,000, you can own a two bedroom condo. Wow. Yes, there's pricey stuff, but the bulk of what we work with is going to be what we call investment grade. Most of that fits within kind of that 100 to about 400,000. Once you get kind of over 500,000-600,000, it's kind of what we call shiny, flashy toy.
Right.
Meaning someone just wants something to show off, basically.
Right. No, that's not why I would go to Tulum. It is. That's not my thing, But again, I'm a New Yorker, so it's a little different. My shiny, I already had that. So I'm just thinking this is wonderful, and you see it. And by the way, I just read, I get a lot of, as you know, publications, and I was just reading an article where somebody compared Puerto Vallarta to Playa del Carmen, and it really was interesting to me. Their judgment purposes didn't matter to me because I was just fascinated at the detail they were explaining. Because I did a destination wedding. We went to Playa del Carmen for this for my sweetheart. I've known her forever. And it was very convenient. It was very simple, and everything was again all inclusive. Adults only, no children, 5 swimming pools, and all this other stuff. It was quite remarkable a place to be.
Mhm.
And I'm seeing that kind of growth. So it's exciting for you, and you're having a good time doing this, aren't you?
Yep. So everything, again, this is not just Mexico. If you are a CIPS, you are traveling outside of the country for business reasons, it's most likely a tax write-off.
That's
So if you need
exactly
a tax write-off, you can do that. Don't overdo it, of course, but yes, part or all of it can be a tax write-off.
well, I just love this so much. I want to make sure that when I'm finished and when I'm doing my editing, I have maybe a link or two to some of the locations that you've got. So you sent me a really fabulous video. Maybe you can get me those links and I can add them to the end of the video. I'm just so
Definitely.
proud of you. I love the fact that you're so, I mean, this you're a smart guy who instead saying, "Oh my gosh, the world that I knew has ended and the sky is falling," and crawled
Mhm.
into a cave and rolled rock in front of it. You're a guy who said, "Well, okay, things are changing. I need to change." Very, very smart that you did that research. Wouldn't it be lovely if everybody I ever taught as a student did research all the time? Wouldn't that be fun for you? I wish
Yep,
that were
that was.
true. It's not.
Mhm.
True. It is not true. Well, I'm excited, my friend. So, anything else you want to add? I know well, make sure that whatever you send me, how do people get into obviously get in touch with you? And maybe you can send me and I can plug it into a separate slide like the next time you're going, how often you're doing it, things of that kind, so that I can
Yep.
make people can find you and get some pictures on kind of what you're doing because I think it's awesome. I'm excited. I'm excited. It's very cool.
Yep. And you should come with us one of these future trips.
I will do that. Usually I find out about it, but I'm going to talk to as I said, my daughter and son-in-law love Mexico so much, and she loved Tulum, and it would be I think it would be fun for them if they had a place of their own. So I'm going to probably see her this weekend. You know, she's a busy girl, but
Mhm.
maybe look at maybe doing something with them to buy down there. And that's another question that needs to be included in the video. Talk to me about financing. Is it cash only, or are they financeable?
So the traditional method is going to be all cash, meaning you would need to figure out your cash situation here in the US or in Canada or whatever your home country is. There are some ways to finance. Off the top of my head, first way is some developers have after purchase developer financing. Usually that's going to be anywhere from maybe a 3 year to 5 year balloon, meaning you're going to run into your problem again. How do I get access to that cash at that 3 or 5 year balloon? But it buys some time. So that's number one. Um, that's usually going to be at a interest rate that is below their interest rate. So usually I see 5 to 6% interest, sometimes interest only, sometimes fully amortized.
Okay.
Second way basically is a local Mexican bank. So there's very, 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 very few banks that will do it, but there are a couple. One of them is called Intercom, InterCAM. They do have a foreign national buyer program. We have not discussed with them because their requirements are very, very crazy. So you basically, whatever it is to get an A paper full doc mortgage here in the US, that and then multiply the requirements by 10 is kind of how we saw it.
Well, that
Because
doesn't
they're going to scrutinize everything, including the property.
right.
The
Right.
last way is there are some US outfits, and usually they are going to be private equity groups, and they basically will fund the purchase in Mexico using your US credit and US financials. Same thing, you need to be full doc, unfortunately, and you need to have a 700 minimum FICO. Um, Option number two, which is the Mexican bank, option number three, which is the US financial institution, interest rates are going to be very high. And that's basically the norm down there. The interest rates will end up 10 to 12% or more.
Mhm.
So if you can figure out how to get your cash figured out here in the US or your home country, here in the US, we're around 7%. So if you do a cash out refi, 7%. That's better than 10 to 12%.
Yeah, so yeah, using the equity in your home because a lot of people still have equity.
If you do a HELOC, same thing. But the HELOC will grow at some point. Unfortunately, that's how they work.
Yep.
If you have a retirement account, so
Right.
a 401k, you can borrow against that. You can roll over a 401k into what's called a self-directed IRA.
Right.
So if your balance is higher than your intended purchase amount, you can use a self-directed IRA to purchase. Keep in mind, however, investment only, meaning you are not using it
It's for
extended periods.
I talk about that. Can an IRA own real estate? And the answer is yes, it can, but you have to pretend you don't use it at all. It is no different than a piece of paper that's a stock. You don't paper your walls with pieces of stock paper. It's very same. So it would not, it can be used as a rental. It can be used as a rental, but the trustee of the IRA handles all of that.
Mhm.
And then all the money that goes in goes back into your IRA. Yeah, it's very convoluted, but yeah, so there's something. If somebody says I don't want to use all my cash, there
Mhm.
are options. I think it's awesome. Hey, I'm going to talk
Mhm.
to my kiddo, but I really appreciate you taking this time, Spencer. I admire you tremendously, and I know
Yep.
I'm going to get to see you very soon. And yes, and just if you can take a couple minutes, maybe today, and send me along those things because I want to try to
Mhm.
get this posted soon, maybe
Okay.
over
Yeah.
the weekend.
Definitely.
And I admire you, and please tell your wife I said hello if she remembers me, and I can't wait to get more information out and about this and promote it. I'll send you the link when I'm through so that you can
Mhm.
promote it as well to your team. And
Okay.
let's just make this happen even bigger than it already is, my friend.
Mhm. Yep. And thank you for all that you do and supporting all of us that are CIPS and keeping everything moving.
I do my best because it matters. It's a passion of mine, and it always will be. And I think you saw I got to go back to the first time. In some cases, I went back in Belgium in January, which is when my dad was in
Mhm.
battle of the Bulge, and there were people
Mhm.
there that I hadn't seen in 3 years. So it was very wonderful and emotional to be back there and just be with everyone again. And although it was winter and then it was cold, and that's a whole separate
Yeah.
issue. But yeah, so and I always look for CIPSs over there too. So
Yep.
you are the best, Spencer. Thank you so very much for your time. And I will be getting this together. Send me what you can get, and then let's get it out there and telling the whole world about the really cool things that you guys are doing. I'm very proud of you.
Okay. No problem. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you, Spencer.
Okay.
So, wasn't that interesting? So, you might be inspired after this to maybe look into doing one of your own, doing investing down there on your own. And so, what you're going to find at the end of the video is contact information for Spencer, a couple of web addresses for the communities that he's working in, actively working in, and other information I asked him to share. You saw at the end of the video, I asked him to share that additional detail so that if you have interest or know someone that has interest, please reach out to him because it's a tremendous opportunity. And so I hope you enjoy it, and please reach out to Spencer. Reach out to me if you have any questions. Don't forget to subscribe because I have more content coming soon. Thank you very much for watching.